Welcome to Pause on Purpose. Got a question for you. What causes a big head to calm down? In other words, what can decrease the size of a big head? Your arrogance, our pride. I'll tell you what does it. A soft heart. A soft heart will decrease a big head. What do I mean by that? Well, in the first century church, Corinthians, Paul's talking to them, and he's using great illustrations from the Old Testament of how the children of Israel, as they were going through the wilderness wanderings, they fell to various temptations where they began to grumble about God's care and provision for them. Every time you turned around, it just seemed like they were grumbling and complaining, grumbling and complaining. God would deliver, they would rejoice, they would say, God's good. And then the next page or the next chapter or the next verse, it would say, and then they started grumbling against Moses, which really meant they were grumbling against God. And it was always something. If it wasn't manna, it was water. If it wasn't water, it was meat. You know, it was always something. And Paul says, be careful in your walk that you don't say, well, I would never be susceptible to that the way that they were. Paul says, be careful. In fact, this is what he says, 1 Corinthians 10:12. He says, if you think you are standing strong, in other words, big head, be careful not to fall. The temptations in your life are no different from what others experience. And God is faithful. He will not allow the temptation be more than what you can stand. When you're tempted, he will show you a way out so you can endure it. See, Paul says a way out of a big head, the way to shrink a big head is through a tender heart. We have to be sensitive to the Spirit of God when he's leading us through times of temptation. The enemy wants us to think that God's not being good, that he doesn't really care about us. And that's what happened in the Old Testament. They fell victim to the temptations that God doesn't care. He's not involved in our life. And where is he? If he did, he'd take care of us. And they started grumbling and complaining. This happens in families, it happens in businesses, happens in organizations, it happens in churches, it happens across the board, it happens in governments. The key is to remain tender-hearted with the Lord and not get a big head. And if we find ourselves with a big head, it's time to say, Lord, search me, O God, Psalm 139, and know my heart, know my thoughts, and see if there be any wicked way in me. And allow God to tenderize our heart, if you will, so we can reduce the size of our head and not think to think that we're not susceptible to temptation. That's the key. We don't fall victim to what the Israelites did in the desert. God wants us to live victoriously, not like beggars. And he wants us to live circumspectly, not as people who feel like God owes them everything or entitled. So today, let's examine our hearts and ask God to look at them and to make sure our hearts remain tender before him so we don't get a big head. Because, beloved, I know you're walking with God and he walks with you. So keep doing that, and we'll talk to you soon. Have a good day.